Hey boys, as someone who was quite critical of our last transfer window, right? I don't think we had the best of summers. Definitely didn't reinforce in the places we probably should have, right? And we're seeing it a little bit now this season. And we've also had 3 years under Todd Boehly and Clearlake and co, right? So we've had quite a few windows now. And I thought, when's a better time? Until our game on Brighton for Saturday, right? Let's go through every transfer under Todd Boehly and co. Let's rank them. I'll take into account, sort of fee, how they performed, and if they even played for us. Some of these players haven't even played for us, right? So I'll take that into account, and then obviously I'm going to put my little twist on it. So I'm sure not everyone's going to agree. Some people disagree, or let's see which way the pendulum swings, right? So let's get straight into it. We've got a lot of players to get through here. I mean, we've bought a lot, right? So, and not a lot of good either. So let's get through it. Let's see where everyone ranks, right? So Anselmino, not too bad. I think this is a solid C, to be honest. It's going to be resale value if we don't choose to pursue him. He's having a decent loan at Dortmund. Hopefully, he's not one of these players we're just going to keep loaning around and he never plays at Chelsea. I think next season will sort of be, is he going to make the squad? If he's not, let's make profit on him. It doesn't make sense to keep loaning players because potentially we can lose value that way, right? So I think Anselmino, we haven't really seen much of him, so it's hard to judge him. A C is fair. So Amugu, we sold him to Strasbourg, right? I think this is just a sort of a D. Never featured for us, joined us, went on loan, and then we sold him. So you can't really put him anywhere. He's not like a flop. We didn't pay loads of money. Thaddeus Shield, I'd probably put sort of lower C. Paid a lot of money for him when he came in. I don't mind his profile. I think he's a decent, like ball playing defender, left footed as well. So you've got that unique aspect of it. But he hasn't delivered, especially for the money. Slightly injury prone as well. But not a terrible player. But for me, I'm going to put him in C. Angelo. It's D, isn't it? Yes, we made a profit on him. But, we bought him, loaned him, and then sold him. So didn't even feature for us. I don't think he played in the preseason, and that was it. Didn't play for us at all. Went on loan and then we sold him. Yes, we made a bit of profit. Can't really rank him any higher though. Didn't even play for us. Aubameyang, he's got to be E, isn't it? It's got to be E. Maybe D. We brought him in. I think Tuchel wanted him, and then we sacked Tuchel like a week later. So that was really bizarre. So why did we even go out and get him in the first place? I think this was kind of a classic Todd Boehly signing. It was a big name, reputation. That summer, you have to say a lot of the signings that summer flopped. Him, Sterling. We'll go through them, right? But I think Aubameyang has to be E. We didn't pay over the odds for him, but he was on a big salary. He didn't perform, and again, this was a signing we just got wrong from the get go. Datro Fofana, I think we're going to have to put him in E as well. Maybe D, but I think, we spent 10, 15 million on him. We've loaned him out a lot. We've lost value on him. He hasn't really performed. We could have made a profit on him after his loan at Burnley, I believe. Some clubs were interested in him and we could have made a profit. So we should have sold him then. We didn't. We've put him on loan a couple more times. He hasn't performed. His value's dropped. And now we struggle to even find him a club this summer, right? So for me, this has to be an E. Cassaday, it was poor, but I'm not going to put him E. I think it was slightly better than those signings. We brought him in for quite a lot. You're talking in under 21s at Inter. He hadn't really featured in the Inter first team. And we went out and spent like 15 million for him. So it was a lot of money, especially for a midfielder. I don't think we helped the case though. He was on loan at Leicester. We recalled him and then we didn't even really utilise him. So the club definitely messed up his development quite a bit. But I wouldn't say it's an E, but I mean, D isn't exactly great either, right? Dewsbury Hall. Yeah, I'll put him top of C. It's not looking good already, is it? Look how low everyone is. But I'll put him top of C. I don't think we can really rank him any higher. We sort of broke even, made a slight profit selling him to Everton. He was only ever going to be a squad player. Obviously, he only played one season for us. Definitely, he was very helpful in our, competitions, the runs we did. We needed to utilize him and use that, use him as a squad player for the Conference League, and, even helped with the Club World Cup. But I think, you know, we brought him in. We did pay quite a bit. Yes, we made a bit of profit, but you can't really put him any higher than C, to be honest. Caicedo, I mean, straight in S tier, right? You can't put him any lower than S tier. Our and my player of the season last season, with Parma's injuries and whatnot. Caicedo for me, wasn't dropping it below a 7 out of 10. Just an absolute monster. He's reaching that sort of Kante levels, right? He's everywhere on the pitch. Monster in anticipation, winning the ball, on the ball, really underrated. Yes, we paid really high fee and we stole him from Liverpool. But, if you look at how much Rice went for, and Caicedo was so much more complete and so much better of a footballer than Rice is, and we paid basically the same price. So, easily S tier. And one of the players, out of all of these signings, you can say absolutely is world class and really good signing. Cucurella, I'm going to put him in top of A. There is an argument to be made to put him in S tier for sure, and I wouldn't say no to that. But I think if you remember when we signed him, we signed him for a lot of money. And the first, even 2 seasons, but definitely the first season, was below par. He was quite inconsistent. His defensive positioning was all over the place. But, definitely the last 2 seasons, he's really been performing. I think what really did him a world of good was, the Euros for Spain. He was going into that competition in good form, but he played so well in that competition as well, and he sort of brought that back to Chelsea. And since then, he's been, again, Mr. Consistent. So if he had that form from the get-go and the first couple seasons, he was like Cucurella now, I'd put him in S tier. But I think you have to remember back, when people were saying he was a flop and how poor he was, and he was getting benched a lot. I'm going to put him top of A, but definitely a successful signing. Lavia, I'm going to put in B. Now, if Lavia is still, can't stay fit, I would look to sell him next summer. But again, I think we can demand a big fee. We'll probably make a profit on him, even though I think we bought him for about 35 million, right? So he's a great player, unique profile, press proven, really good on the ball, but the guy can't stay fit. If he could stay fit, he'd probably be A and S tier. The games he has played, he's been really good. Him and Enzo is a pretty good partnership with, when Caicedo plays that inverted right back role and he comes into midfield and lets Enzo get more forward, and you have Lavia and Caicedo as that pivot. It really does work. And when Maresca was utilising that in the big games, our midfield was really good. But if he can stay fit, he can easily become A and S tier for me. But if he can't, he can also drop into that C tier. Don't think you can put him lower than that, just because look, we didn't pay over the odds. Even if we look to sell him, we're going to make our money back minimum and probably make a profit. So purely for those reasons, I would put him in B. I don't think you can put him lower. Chukwuemeka, it's probably top of D. Yeah. Can't really put him in C. I liked him when we bought him. I do quite like his profile. It just didn't work out at Chelsea, and that's just the nature. Not every signing is going to be a success, right? We're going to have to accept, some people are going to flop. And I think he got injured quite a lot. When he was breaking into the team, he got an injury, and it was unfortunate. I think Lampard liked him as well. But it was just one of those. It didn't quite work, did it? And we didn't take a massive loss or anything like that. We still got a fee from him, so D tier for me. Delap, I'll probably put Delap in B. You could maybe put him top of C, but I think if you looking in the market, right, an English, prem proven striker, and we got him for 30 million, with his age as well. It's not like we paid over the odds, so purely because of that, we got him on a good fee. He's on relatively low wage. I think B tier. He's not a bad player as well. If some people want to, hate on him or whatever. For me, I do quite like the signing. It's a unique profile. I think it is an upgrade on Jackson. Jackson isn't really a striker. You can tell he kind of wants to work in a two-man striker partnership. I think Jackson 20 years ago in a 4-4-2 sort of system would have been a great player, right? But kind of misprofiled. I don't really see Jackson as a striker. So I think Delap is an improvement on him. I'm going to put him in B tier. Mudryk probably has to go down as the worst signing, doesn't it? I think if you're going to be brutally honest, I think it is the worst signing under Boehly and co. Yeah. Big fee. He was on big wages as well. And I think with the doping, it's not going to help him, right? He's out for a couple years, and even if it gets rectified, even if it gets overturned, we can't bring back those missed years of development. He had not been playing any football, only training away from the team as well. And we brought him in for about 70 million, right? Yes, he had high potential, but did it look like he was going to develop into that player we thought he could be? For me, no. I mean, he had everything. That debut at Anfield was electrifying, right? Really exciting, but just didn't really, flower into any sort of player. And with the doping ban, it's not going to help him. And yes, he might come back in say 2 years, but what's he going to look like? We're probably going to sell him for a loss. So I think it probably will go down as the worst signing under Boehly. And it's not totally the club's fault, There have been other issues at play. No one can account for the doping ban. And I did like him, he's so fast. He does like to take on his player, but the final third just isn't there, is it? So I think it's only right it's E tier. The Sassy, this probably has to be E tier as well. Maybe top of E. It's not the worst signing ever. Definitely one of them though. Look, we paid a lot of money. Kind of played him out of position at right back as well. He's just very slow. He's basically Maguire. He's not very athletic. Yes, he's a big guy. Decent header, but we can't just have someone who's okay in the air. Yeah, he's not very good on the ball. Badger Shields a much better ball playing defender. I think we just got this massively wrong. We did pay a lot of money for him, and I think it's one of the worst signings we've made. And look, you can see that this summer we couldn't really find a club for him. Yes, Bournemouth and other clubs were interested in getting him on loan, but nothing ever happened, right? So for me, this has to be E tier, just for the money spent as well. Asugo. I do quite like Asugo. I'm going to put Asugo in B tier. Yes, he's out with the injury. He obviously had surgeries out for a couple months, but we didn't pay much money for him. At worst, we're going to make quite a decent profit. And I think the nature, the profile of the player, he looks like a good ball-winning midfielder, right? Good tenacity, good work rate. I think he'll be a pretty good player for us. And if he doesn't, at worst, we're going to sell him for a profit. So for me, it's a B tier signing, to be honest. Kendry Paez, I'm going to put in A tier. Maybe a bit controversial. Could be B tier. But we didn't pay over the odds for him. I think if he he's looking like he's having a pretty decent season at Strasbourg. I think if he can develop into the player that, his potential and the talent, if he can develop into that, he's going to become world class. He's got everything there. He just needs to, the mentality, he just needs to train hard and get his head down. And if he does that, we're looking at a world class, attacking midfielder. So good on the ball, dead ball specialist as well, dangerous in the final third. I just really like him as a player, his profile. And we've got the age on his side as well. So, say, he struggles at Strasbourg and we loan him somewhere else. I think we didn't bring him in for massive money due to his age. Clubs are going to take that risk and we're going to get a profit on him, worst case scenario. But to be honest, I have faith in him. I think he's going to develop. And whether he's at Chelsea next year or we put him on loan for one more year, I do think he'll make it at Chelsea. So I'm going to put him in A tier. I do like him. Enzo, this is a tricky one. I'm going to put him. It's hard. I don't. I think B is too low for him, but then A is sort of right. He's in really poor form, right? Like no one can hide that. This season he hasn't been good at all. I think we can't be too reactionary. We can't just write him off. Yeah, he won the World Cup, young player of the tournament, and we sort of bought him on off the back of that, right? Paid massive fee for him, and he only played half a season at Benfica, so the fee he came in for a huge fee, but I think he definitely warranted that. The only issue with me is he's definitely that Tony Cruz kind of profile, right? You can tell he's a deep line playmaker, kind of wants to dictate play, but then he's also got really good off the ball movement. So we can use him as a box crasher getting into the final third, but you can see it's kind of tiring him down. So when he's in form, he's in great form, right? He's world class when he's on his day. So for that purely, I'm going to put him in A tier, and I think even if he continues and has a really poor season, we're gonna make decent money on him. Are we gonna make a profit? No, I don't think anyone's gonna come in and pay 120 million for him, right? Like, but it's certainly sort of like a Real Madrid, PSG. He could definitely cook there. More time on the ball, less physical league, right? And we'll make decent money. We'll definitely get at least 70, 80 million for him, for sure. But I still believe in him. Yes, he's having a really poor season. I haven't been quiet about it. I've been saying he needs to sit on the bench. He needs to eat that bench. And Andre Santos needs to start over him because he's in really poor form. But on his day, when he's in good form and he's fully fit, he is a world class player. So I'm going to put him in A tier. I can hear if some people want to put him in B tier. I can hear it. We did pay a big fee, but for me, I'll put him bottom of A. He's not always consistent. That's the issue. He's a player for the big games, and let's see how he does in the Champions League, right? Cole Palmer, I mean, there's nowhere else to put Cole, right? He's top of S tier. Like, and if I made another tier S plus, he's an S plus. So Cole Palmer single-handedly has just saved Chelsea, right? Under Pochettino, if we didn't have Palmer, it would have been a terrible season, right? He had outstanding numbers. Just a pure gem. And the fact we only got him for 40 million as well. If we got him for 100 million, it wouldn't even change the fact he's S tier, but the fact we spent so little, and he's got the English sort of tax with it as well. I mean, they struck gold. They have to say they got this signing completely right, whoever it was, Stewart, or, whoever was in charge of signing Palmer. Let's give them some more signings. We've certainly had a lot of flops, but no one can criticise with Palmer. This is S tier. He's the best player at Chelsea. Him and Caicedo. Always bring everything. Always consistent. And we need to build the team around these players for sure. Mamadou Sarr. I don't think it's fair to put him anywhere. He's C tier. It's in the middle, right? We can't really put him any higher, any lower. We haven't seen him. We bought him from Strasbourg. We loaned him back. He looks quite tall, quite dominant, and yeah, decent on the ball as well. So let's see how he develops. I think at worst we'll probably make a profit, but can't really place him anywhere else. We haven't seen him. Andre Santos. I'm going to put Andre Santos bottom of A tier. I think he's just below Fernandez, but we scouted this guy from the Brazilian second league, so you have to give props there. To be fair, didn't bring him in for that much money. Yes, the one loan to Forest, we flopped on that. We shouldn't have loaned him. I think that was too early. But that loan to Strasbourg, did so much for him as a player. He really developed there. Even captained the team. And look, it's clear he's going to be playing for Brazil and probably Chelsea for quite a while. He's just a great player, and there's not really much more to say. We didn't pay too much money for him. We didn't rush him. I think the loans were sensible. The only problem is we loaned him to Forest, and that did flop. But I think if we had gotten that loan correct and then Strasbourg, he'd be immediately in the team. We'd be finding ways to get him in. And I think Maresca's going to find a way to try and get him into the team. And we're going to need him anyway. So for me, I really like the signing. I really like him as a player. He's probably one of my favourite players at Chelsea, to be honest. So I'm going to put him in A. Slalina, it's got to be D. I don't think it's quite E. But to be honest, we spent quite a lot of money on him. I think we paid at least sort of 10 million. His value's only gone down. You know, if you check transfer market, you know, he's sitting around 3-4 million. He's gone on multiple loans. It hasn't really worked. He hasn't really, you know, grown into the sort of player we thought he might have with his potential. I think he has sort of leveled off. At worst, he's kind of like a third choice keeper. So I'm going to put him in D. It's not the worst tier. I think this was reserved for these players, but it wasn't a great signing. Okay, Miley. I'll probably put him in D. Maybe that's quite harsh, but I don't see him playing for Chelsea. He's going to probably just keep going around on loan. You know, most people probably don't even know who he is, right? You know, American, we bought him in. And I think he's just going to go on loan and we're going to look to try and make a profit on him. So I'm going to put him in D. I don't think, you know, he's a left back. He's not going to get in over Cucurella, and we just bought Joel Hatto. So he's not going to be in the Chelsea team. Jamie Gittins, I'll probably put him in sort of C tier. Potential's there, you know, obviously fast feet, great dribbling. And is it an upgrade over Sancho? Probably. But I think we paid over the odds. You know, we paid 55, 60 million. We paid so much. And that's okay if he's the finished product, but he's quite clearly not that finished product. So for me, that's going to hurt him. I'm going to put him in C tier. Don't hate him as a player. I think he's definitely talented and he can maybe in a couple of years become something, you know, England's #1 left winger. You don't know. He's got the potential to be. But I just think we paid so much money for him and he's not a clear upgrade. And he doesn't warrant a start, right? So for me, I'm going to put him in C tier. João Felix also has to be in E tier. Probably one of the worst signings, him and Mudryk, right? I don't understand why we bought him. When we bought him, I didn't understand it at all. And, you know, looking on the Chelsea timeline, and people were hyped that we bought him, and I was like, did you not see this guy on loan? Like, he was literally at our club on loan and did not perform. So inconsistent. Yes, he's got bright sparks and he can, he's done a fancy skill move. He's got some nice dribbling, but zero end product. You know, bad mentality. There's a reason, you know, he's flopped everywhere he's gone. And the fact that we brought him in for so much money, it was just a terrible signing. And the fact that, you know, he's in Saudi now, it just speaks volumes. So one of the worst signings we've made, him and Mudryk, definitely. Malo Gusto, I'll probably put him just behind Lavia. I think BT is fair for him. Didn't pay over the odds. You know, his value's gone up since we've had him. So if we did look to sell him, we'd make a profit. Look, he's not very defensively minded, so he's not going to be like that sort of Reece James role. But you can see when we played PSG and against some of the bigger teams, you know, his pace in behind is very useful, and especially if we're going to utilize Sanchez with those long balls, pinging it over to Gusto. You know, we can look to get him behind, especially if they've got an attacking fullback like Nuno Mendes. So, look, we're going to make money on him if we sell him. I quite like him as a player. He's still young. And to be honest, you know, there's not that many good right backs and left backs. It is quite a dry market and you do pay a lot of money for them. So I think this was a decent signing. Mark Gate. I mean, we got him on a free, right? So I'll probably put him in C tier. We just haven't seen enough of him. Obviously, he was on loan at Sunderland. We've recalled him now. We haven't seen him since. So I think if we do look to sell him, obviously we're going to make a profit. We didn't spend any money on him, right? So I'm going to put him in C tier. Don't think you can really put him higher or lower, though. So that's where he's going to go for me. Joel Hatto. I do quite like this signing. Do I want to put him in? I think top of C tier is fair. You know, obviously the potential's there, but we paid a lot of money for him, and Cucurella is that main starter. You know, maybe, you know, BT, bottom end of B tier is fairer. Okay, I'm going to put bottom of B tier. I think maybe C tier when I'm looking at the other players. You know, Definitely do think he's got more to bring for Chelsea. The only problem is I don't see him as a main starter for at least another 2 years, so I have to kind of take that into account. Obviously, he's so young, and especially as a defender. But he's a modern, like sort of inverted left back. Can play as a centre back as well. But I think the club uh, and Enzo, they do see him as that inverted left back who's going to tuck in or get into midfield. Can't play Cucurella's role where he's getting into the final third and attacking, right? But he's definitely got a lot of potential. He's a unique profile and captained Ajax at a young age. So I think maybe C is a little harsh. I'll put him bottom of B, but he can definitely swing. He could easily be A, but he could also easily be C, D, depending on how he develops, right? Koulibaly, maybe E tier. I mean, we got a decent fee for him, so because of that, I'm going to put him bottom of D. Saudi did come in clutch, and they spent a decent amount of money for him. Again, it was part of that summer. Him and Sterling, the main sort of culprits. We spent a lot of money, and Aubameyang, and they all flopped. We brought in big reputation, big names. Todd Boehly, splashing a lot of money at that time, and it just didn't work. So, D tier. I quite liked him, when he was at Napoli, but it just didn't work at Chelsea, and that's the nature of it. Madueke, I think because of the fee we got for him, you're going to have to put him in the bottom of B tier. I wasn't his biggest fan at Chelsea. I thought he was selfish. I thought, we thought he was the main guy. He's had a decent start to life at Arsenal. He's not been on fire, but you can see that he's definitely a decent winger. Like, is he an upgrade over is Gittins an upgrade over Madueke? It's tough to say he is, to be honest. Currently, Madueke is probably the better player. Gittins can certainly develop, though, in a couple of years and become better than him. But if you look at it in the sort of context of, we spent the same fee that we sold Madueke for. And don't get me wrong, we got a great fee for Madueke, especially Arsenal giving us that money. I just don't think spending what we got on Gittins was very smart, to be honest. So I'm going to put Madueke ahead of Gittins. I'm going to put him in B tier. Pedro Neto. I'll put him top of B tier. I think just ahead of Lavia. I won't quite put him in A tier. I don't. Can he potentially become world class? I don't think so. But works hard for the team. He's got a good cross on him, and obviously because he can play left and right wing is definitely a benefit to Chelsea. But I just don't see him. He's sort of reached for me, the sort of pinnacle of the player he can become. I don't think he can really develop and really add a bunch of goals and assists to his game. I just don't think he quite has that composure in the final third. A lot of the times he gets into dangerous positions, lifts his head up, but doesn't really take his man on, which can be frustrating. Definitely better on the right than he is the left. Because we've signed Estevao, he is going to play mainly on the left now. Obviously, we got Garnacho and Gittins in that position. But I think we didn't pay too much. We paid, what was it, about 45 million for him. So, yes, it was a lot. But I think if we were going to sell him, we'd probably get that sort of fee, especially if you look at what we sold Madueke for. But I do like him as a player. I don't think he's quite consistent enough, though. Nkunku, I mean, he's got to be sort of top of D tier. You have to say it was obviously a flop signing. Wasn't always his fault. He did get a lot of injuries at sort of at important moments, which was quite unfortunate. But because, AC Milan gave us quite a decent fee for him, I think you have to put him in D tier. It doesn't quite warrant being at the bottom of the flop section. But it just didn't work at Chelsea, which is unfortunate. When we signed him from Leipzig, I thought it was going to work, but whether he got injuries or he just fell out of favour with the team, it was just unfortunate, wasn't it? So, João Pedro, I think you have to put him in S tier. I think you have to say they got this signing correct. The fact that we only got him for the fee we did, we were only really competing with Newcastle, and we got him ahead of Newcastle. Is he quite a striker? I don't know if he is. He's definitely more of a shadow striker, likes to play 10, which is why the Delap injury is quite annoying, right? But I think he's so versatile, outstanding technique. You can tell this guy's born to play in the Champions League, definitely world class potential, and you know the numbers he's getting now. It's hard to say he isn't. Especially you look at his performances in the Club World Cup, turning up against the big game, big teams, right? So for me, definitely S tier. One of the signings this summer we definitely got right. It wasn't a massive fee, isn't on huge wages. I just like him as a player. I think this is definitely S tier. Okay, Petrovic, I think probably bottom of C tier. The fact that we've got a decent fee for him saves it. We did pay a decent amount of money. He played a few games for us. You can tell he's not Chelsea level. Had a decent year at Strasbourg, but he's not like top six club sort of potential or ability wise. And I think the reason we got a decent fee for him saves him and puts him in C tier for me. Mike Penders. It's tough to put him anywhere higher than B, to be honest. I'll put him with like a Sugo and the other players, right? You could put him in A tier, but we did spend 20 million, which is a lot for a goalkeeper, especially a young one. Now, is he a Courtois regen? He could be. He definitely could be. He's really tall, but he's still good at playing with the ball out from the back. So look, he's an exciting goalkeeper. He's just so young. You can tell he's gonna, if he doesn't break through next year, he's gonna have to go on loan again. So we're not gonna see him for at least 2 years. So that's gonna play into it. But if we're talking potential, he's definitely the highest potential keeper on this list for sure. Estevao, you have to put Estevao S tier. I'm sorry, he can't go. I'm going to put him just ahead of João Pedro. This is the kind of teenager that gets poached by, either PSG, Barcelona, Real Madrid, but just due to the nature of how their clubs and how they're built, Barcelona really were interested in him. They got Lamine Yamal, top 2 player in the world. So Estevao isn't going to break into that position. Same with Real Madrid. They chose to go with Masterclass. They've got Arda Güler. They've got Vinny, Mbappe, Rodrigo. They're just stacked in those attacking positions. And it's the same for PSG, right? They've got Kovacic, Kvaratskhelia, Dembele. They're just in Doué. They're just stacked in those wing-in positions. So it just naturally lined up that we could go out and get Estevao. Huge fan of him. I mean, potential-wise, it's him and Palmer, right? Like they could easily be competing for Ballon d'Ors. That's how good they are. And the fact that he can also play shadow striker as well as right wing. Look, if we look back from this list from a couple of years from now, I think putting him in S tier is definitely warranted. The talent it's there. It's evident to see from the few games we've seen him at Chelsea already, right? And the mentality is top. He's really level-headed, which is what I like. Sanchez. Oh. Look, he's not awful, but he's not great, right? I'm going to put him in C tier. Like, he's ahead of Petrovic. I can't put him in B tier because he's not a Chelsea type of keeper. I'm going to be brutally honest. We paid a lot of money for him. He'd fallen out at Brighton at his previous club. But I think when you see Jorgensen play, you kind of take a step back and you're like, okay, I'm actually glad when Sanchez plays, right? Because Jorgensen is definitely not Chelsea level. And, yes, he's got the bozo gene. He can switch off and make mistakes. But on his day, he can be a good keeper. So I think C tier is fair. He's nothing special, but he's definitely not a terrible keeper. Fofana. Oh, where am I going to put Fofana? I'm not Fofana's biggest fan, but then it's a tough one, I'm going to put him in. Let's put him ahead of Sanchez. Let's pick Gittins here. Yeah, I think I quite like. Let's switch that around a little. Maybe put Sanchez here. Yeah, I think I like that. Yeah, I'm going to put Fofana in C tier. How much did we pay for him? It's got to be about 80 million. He's on really big wages as well. I think he's the second highest earning, just behind Sterling. he's injury prone. Like, yes, the potential was there when we bought him. I don't think he's going to reach the potential we could have hit. He's just so injury prone. He can't stay fit. He's got brittle legs. That's brutally honest. He is a talented centre back. He is really comfortable on the ball. I just don't think he's going to develop into an £80 million defender. We've lost a lot of value on him. If we're going to sell him now, we're probably talking 40, 45 million for him. Don't think we'll achieve more than that, to be honest. So we're going to take a big loss on him, but he can turn it around if he can stay fit. For sure, he's going to start, and him and Colwell could build a nice partnership. I wanted to put him in D. I'm going to put him in top of C. But if he can't stay fit, then for sure it's D, and it's a complete flop signing. Toss in. I think putting Toss in. I mean, we got him on a free, right? He's on quite high wages, but we got him on a free. He's not a bad player. I don't think he's good enough to start every game for Chelsea at centre back, but you can't really have too much against it. We got him on a free signing, so it is what it is. Ugachukwu. He's probably bottom of C tier. I mean, we did make a profit on him, believe it or not, when we sold him to Burnley. We got a decent fee. So we did make a profit, but again, we bought him, loaned him out, didn't quite work, and then we sold him. So didn't really play for Chelsea, but we didn't take a loss. So he can't go lower than that for me. Washington, this has to be E tier for sure. Brought him in for about 20 million. Is a lot of money for a young teenager from Brazil, right? And just hasn't played for Chelsea. He's gone on loan, or he's sat in the academy, and he hasn't grown. His potential is stagnated. He needs to play football, and he hasn't. For me, for the money spent as well. This is an E signing. Zakaria, it's probably. Is it E? I think it is E as well. Yes, we got him on loan, but we paid a loan fee. We also paid quite a lot of wages for him. He didn't play much for Chelsea on loan as well, and when he did, he wasn't great. I'm going to have to put him in E tier. He did flop. Jorgensen. I'm trying not to be too reactionary, right? Because we're just coming off the Lincoln game, and he was awful in that game. We didn't bring him in for too much, about 20 million. Are we going to make that money back? Probably not. He's only ever going to be a backup keeper, right? But I have to put him in E. I don't think he's anywhere near good enough for Chelsea. He just can't claim any crosses. He's quite eccentric. He rushes out of his box, but he never claims the ball. Always missing his punches. He's going to give away penalties doing that. He's going to punch people. Like, you're not a boxer, okay? You're a goalkeeper. So he's going to be an E tier for me. I think it's a flop signing. Kellyman as well. This has to be top 3, one of the worst signings. How much did we pay for him? Like 25 million, something ridiculous. Definitely something fishy going on with Villa, right? Like, we bought one of their players, they bought one of our players in what was his name? Brain's gone now. The left back, whatever. But yeah, we spent 25 million on him. Is he even worth 5 million? I don't even know. Like, he's gone on loan to Cardiff now in League One. So definitely something a bit fishy with Villa, So he's in E tier for me. Jackson, where do we put? Where's our boy Jackson going? He didn't have like a bad season for Chelsea, right? But I don't think you can put him. You can't put him any higher than C. But again, he wasn't terrible. Like, he definitely had some bad games. Robbed Palmer of a lot of assists. But I think, when you take a step back and you look at his Chelsea career, he did help us get top 4. He did score some important goals. Got a hat trick away to Spurs, right? I think if you take a step back, he's not awful, but for me, he's just not a striker. He's more of like a winger or a shadow striker. So he's going to get sort of middle of C tier. Maybe Bayern Munich buy him, but if they don't, I think we can sell him elsewhere and still make a bit of money as well. So Jadon Sancho for me has to go in D tier. I was quite excited when we signed him. I've always been a sort of Sancho fan, to be honest. I liked him at Dortmund. When Manchester United got him, I wanted Chelsea to go out and get him as well, right? But it just didn't work. He's just not the player he could have been, right? So many times he'd get on the ball, sort of run to the byline, do a few step overs, and then pass it backwards. He's doing like the sort of Grealish tactic, right? Just he was just scared to take on his man. Like the days of him being an exciting winger at Dortmund are gone. He didn't show it at Chelsea, and he was on big wages as well. Like that's the only reason we didn't go out and sign him is because he just wanted such big wages. So unfortunately, he's a flop. Renato Vega, probably put him top of C tier. You know, you could make an argument for put him in B tier because we did make good money for him. You know, considering we bought him for about 12, 15 million, right? Came in, only played a couple games, then had a tantrum, wanted to go out on loan. We sent him to loan to Juve, and then we made good money on selling him. So, I think top of C tier. You know, considering we bought him, you know, we scouted him. He didn't really play at Chelsea, and we still sold him for 30 odd million. I think that's a good profit, so it warrants being in C tier. Okay, Diego is probably D tier, isn't it? You know, we sold him straight to Strasbourg. He didn't play for Chelsea. It's just one of those players we brought in. We were probably going to try and loan a couple of times, but put him in on a permanent transfer was the best way. So not too much more to say. Sterling, bottom of E tier. Huge wages. Like we can't get rid of him. He's stuck at the club. He's on 300k. Right. We spent a lot of money on him. You know, yes, he was okay in the first season, but I've never been the biggest fan of Sterling, to be honest. I think the main thing about him is his off the ball movement. You know, he's normally at the right place at the right time, so he gets easy tap ins. But he's not a winger who's going to take his man on and just completely obliterate the fullback and get a deadly cross in. He's not that kind of winger. And when we brought him in, it just seems like we didn't really know how to use him. He was just a big name. He's English. We got him from City. It was just one of those, Todd Boehly signings that just didn't work. And we're stuck with him. He's at the club right now, playing with the under 21s or whatever, and he's on 320k a week. So purely flat region, you have to put him at E tier. But I think he's not the worst signing because at least he did chip in with some goals. You know, he did score against Dortmund in the Champions League. You know, so he did chip in. I think Felix and Mudryk are worse signings. Garnacho, I'm going to put Garnacho in sort of C tier. I'll put him high C tier. Like it could work. You know, he could be in B tier for sure. Obviously fell out at Manchester United, but we've seen players struggle at Manchester United, go on to other clubs and make a name for themselves and turn it around. He definitely could turn it around at Chelsea. Only problem is he going to make that left wing spot his? I don't know if he will, to be honest. You know, there's competition, and whether we sell Pedro Neto or any, and he's battling out with Gittins, it remains to be seen. But it's quite clear Estevao is going to make that right wing position his, right? So Garnacho C tier for me, but he could definitely be B tier. You know, his pace is going to be useful, especially in the big games. You know, if someone's got a high line, we can definitely utilize that. But I think we bought him in for 40 million. It was a lot of money. So I think C tier is fair. And then Buonate, maybe it's quite harsh, but I'm going to put Buonate in D tier. I just think, we got this guy on loan. He's the backup to Cole Palmer. And we were flirting with the idea of bringing Xavi Simons and Fermin Lopez in. You know, these players are definitely an upgrade over Buonate. And I don't think he's a bad player by any means. I just think, the fact that we got top four, we won the Club World Cup. I really wanted us to invest a bit more in these positions, especially a backup to Cole Palmer is a very important position, especially if he's going to have that groin issue. And I don't quite think, he's going to be Champions League level. I think he's an okay backup, but we could have done more to rectify that position. And if Palmer does need to get surgery on his groin, do we trust Buonate to start that 10 position every game? you know, especially if the lap's out. You know, I wouldn't mind if João Pedro played that position. We played the lap up top, but because the lap's out as well, you can just see where the squad's kind of it's getting weak, right? So that's my list overall, boys. Let me know what you think. Obviously, you know, Palmer, Caicedo, Estevao, and João Pedro for me, clearly the best signings we've made out of this whole list. And the biggest flops have to be Mudryk, Felix, Sterling. They just have to be the biggest flops. You know, big money, big names, and just didn't deliver. So let me know where you would have had, you know, who you would have had at S tier or E tier. You know, it was quite a long video, so if you are still here, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. I drop Chelsea videos every day, and I'll see you boys tomorrow. So peace.